What if we told you that Canada, the US closest ally, neighbor, and economic partner has just slammed the brakes on its travel relationship with America? What if we told you that tens of thousands of flights have been canceled, bookings have cratered, and Canadian airlines are pulling the plug on US routes at record levels? This isn't just a travel hiccup, this is a full-blown geopolitical boycott fueled by political tension, trade retaliation, and rising nationalist sentiment on both sides of the border. Millions of Americans have no idea what's happening. But behind the scenes, major airlines are losing billions, border towns are collapsing, and tourism-dependent states like Florida, New York, and California are scrambling. But before move to video, please subscribe us for more this type of videos. Now let's dive into the list. Chapter Number 1. A sudden shift in North American travel. In early 2025, Canadian travel to the United States nosedived. This wasn't some gradual dip, it was a cliff fall. Major reports showed that forward bookings to the US dropped by over 70% by March 2025. In April, border crossings by road and air were down over 35% and 19.9% respectively compared to the same time last year. That's tens of thousands of canceled trips, millions of empty airline seats, and billions in lost revenue. Why? A combination of new US policies, rising tariffs, and nationalist campaigns within Canada have created a perfect storm. Ottawa didn't formally declare a boycott, but government officials began urging citizens to choose Canada in their vacations. And Canadians listened. Over 75% of those with US travel plans canceled or rerouted them elsewhere. The message is clear. The friendly border is not so friendly anymore. The Great North American Travel Corridor is collapsing in real time. Chapter 2. New US entry laws spark backlash. It all began with a single bureaucratic decision, a new US entry requirement that quietly went into effect in April 2025. Canadians planning to stay longer than 30 days in the US were now required to register with American Immigration Authority, sir, face fines of up to $50 and potential detention. For a country used to unrestricted access, this was more than a nuisance. It was an insult. Travel influencers exploded on social media. Advocacy groups cried foul. Prominent Canadian politicians accused the US of treating Canadian citizens like criminals. In response, calls to cancel US trips surged. Even worse, these new rules weren't well publicized. Thousands of travelers were blindsided at border checkpoints. Several Canadians were detained at airports for overstaying without proper registration, igniting fury back home. What was once the most seamless border in the world suddenly felt like a hostile checkpoint. Chapter 3. A tourism meltdown. Canadian tourism is a massive force in the US economy. In 2024 alone, Canadians contributed over $20.5 billion to American business shuttles, restaurants, shops, and theme parks. But with a boycott in full swing, experts predict that the US could lose up to $21 billion in export revenue by the end of 2025. States like Florida, New York, Washington, and Michigan, which rely heavily on Canadian visitors, are seeing historic shortfalls. Some Florida counties have already reported a 38% drop in tourist spending compared to the previous year. Thousands of jobs are at risk. Airlines are cutting routes. Rental car companies, duty-free stores, and even Disney World are seeing Canadian bookings vanish. And the ripple effects are spreading. Chapter 4. Canadian airlines pull the plug. Air Canada, WestJet, and low-cost carriers like Flair and Lynx have all reacted to the crisis with sharp and brutal efficiency. In summer 2025, Canadian carriers collectively slashed over 25% of their US-bound flights. One major airline reduced its US capacity by 7%, citing plummeting demand and geopolitical uncertainty. Some routes like Vancouver to Seattle, Toronto to Orlando, and Montreal to Boston are being completely suspended. These aren't obscure connections, these are lifelines for business, family, and tourism. And it's not just airlines, Tour operators, cruise lines, and even cross-border bus services are trimming operations, anticipating the boycott to stretch well into 2026. The message from Canadian consumers is crystal clear. America isn't worth the hassle anymore. Chapter 5. What's fueling the fury? The boycott didn't start in a vacuum. It's been building slowly, quietly for years. Trade tensions between the US and Canada have worsened since 2023. The US slapped new tariffs on Canadian automobiles, lumber, and dairy exports, sparking anger across Canadian provinces. Meanwhile, the Canadian dollar continues to weaken, making US vacations more expensive than ever. For the average Canadian, that Disneyland trip now costs 15% more than it did just a year ago. Social media campaigns like Boycott USA and Stay North have gone viral, rallying support for local travel. Even celebrities and travel influencers have joined the push to avoid the US in favor of friendly countries. What started as a policy issue has snowballed into a national movement. Chapter 6. The Fallout for America. Make no mistake, this isn't just Canada's problem. The US is bleeding money from the travel boycott. In just the first 5 months of 2025, Florida lost nearly $1.9 billion in Canadian tourist spending. California followed with a $1.1 billion hit, while New York posted an estimated $800 million loss. Border towns like Niagara Falls, Buffalo, and Detroitans dependent on Canadian visitors for daily traffic care, seeing local businesses shutter. One report showed that up to 80% of walk-in traffic at U.S. duty-free shops has evaporated. Even Las Vegas casinos are feeling the squeeze. Fewer Canadians means fewer international high rollers. And in an economy already showing signs of slowing, this boycott could be the tipping point. So why isn't anyone in Washington panicking? Chapter 7. Could this be the new normal? Here's the scariest question of all. Is this travel boycott permanent? Experts are warning that unless something drastic changes like diplomatic negotiations, tariff rollbacks, or immigration policy reforms, the damage could become structural. Forecasts from major tourism boards suggest a 9 to 12% drop in international arrivals through 2026 if the Canada boycott holds. That's not just bad for airlines, it's catastrophic for state budgets that rely on tourism taxes. Even worse, other countries are watching. If Canada can boycott the US over trade and immigration policies, what's stopping nations like Mexico, the UK, or Germany from doing the same? Is the United States becoming too expensive, too difficult, and too politically volatile for international tourists? Chapter 8. What comes next? There are murmurs of compromise. Canadian officials hinting that negotiations with Washington may be possible if the US softens its stance on visitor registrations and tariffs. But for now, the travel war continues. Canadian citizens are voting with their wallet sand, their passports. Some are redirecting travel to Europe, the Caribbean, and even Mexico, where entry is easier, cheaper, and more welcoming. Meanwhile, American businesses are left wondering whether Canada's billions will ever return. If this is the new normal, what does it say about US global relations? And how many more diplomatic boycotts are quietly brewing under the radar? This isn't just about canceled vacations. This is a geopolitical fracture between two of the world's closest allies, sparked by policy, fueled by pride, and accelerated by economic pain. Canada has effectively said, "We're done for now." And if the United States doesn't recalibrate, this might not be the last boycott we see in 2025. So, ask yourself, is your state next to feel the pain? Will your economy survive if more allies follow Canada's lead? Because make no mistake, this isn't just about air travel. This is about America's place in a rapidly changing world.